Yu-Gi-Oh! Rivals. Many fans' favorite characters, both for their awesome decks and for all the yaoi. But we're only going to be talking about the first thing today, as we take each deck and rank them from worst to best, or more like good to great. Because honestly, in some form, I like all of these decks. They're all really cool and do their job of feeling like that thing the protagonist must overcome, the challenge they have to face, while also being good representatives of the characters playing them and having just their own awesome badass moments. So because of this, if this list feels a little nitpicky, yeah, it was. It was very hard to do. But essentially, we're just ranking as to who makes you feel the most awesome to see get played. I'm sure many people will disagree with my opinions, but you can leave that in the comments section below. So without further ado, let's get started. Start this list off, we're actually going to be talking about two characters, and that are the rivals of Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. First, we have Reiji, who is an awesome character that I love, and the DDDs get some really awesome moments, but for the most part, I kind of forget most of them. Arc 5 decks all sort of have the same problem, and that is they just kind of vomit out unmemorable monster after unmemorable monster, and DDDs are no different. A lot of times when I try to remember any of them, or if I'm just going through common bulk and see them, I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, that exists. It's not very memorable or even all that interesting. And the best DDD cards, Reiji only used like once so they could do the structure deck tie-in. And yeah, that's kind of just where that ends for me. Now, where the thing comes is that I actually don't consider Reiji the main rival of Arc 5. For that, I consider Sawatori. Why? Because I feel like he is genuinely A on Yuya's level, and I feel the two actually do a really good job of pushing each other and helping each other get better as the show progresses, as they sort of compete in varying ways, whether it's as a duelist or as an entertainer. But as far as decks go, yeah, he's also pretty uninteresting. He changes decks every few episodes for the first part, which was interesting if they kept to that, but then he's just stuck with this Abyss Actor deck, and aesthetically, I don't think they're all that interesting, nor do I think they fit him very well. And then he just doesn't even get a lot of duels in the later half as Arc 5 just gets more and more crazy. So, yeah, all in all, these two characters, while good in their own right, don't really stick out that much deck wise. Up next, and I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for this one, we have the Chaz. Chaz's big thing is that he has several different decks he uses throughout the show, and while I think they do a better job of making them more interesting than they did with Sawatori, I feel like none of them ever fit quite right. His first deck is just kind of like a whatever thing that then gets discarded after like 2, 3 duels. Then he's got XYZ, which is a holdover from Kaiba. Then he gets the Armed Dragons, which, while cool, I don't know. They always just felt kind of random for them to show up here. And then he gets the Ojamas, which I love the Ojamas, but they don't really feel like something that's competing against Jaden, which I feel is kind of a big deal for a rival. They just kind of feel like their own thing, and Chaz kind of feels like after a while he's just kind of in his own direction that doesn't relate back to his rivalry with Jaden, and that's kind of a big deal when you're supposed to be the main rival and we're ranking the main rival's deck. Up next, we have our other twofer, and that is Ryoga with the Shark deck and Kaito with the Glowy Guys deck. Yeah, the problem I think kind of speaks for itself, and that is that these decks at least have consistent, unique themes, which is why they score higher than the other two. But I don't really remember anything they do besides summon a boss monster, which is a problem with a lot of Zale decks. And yeah, that's sort of the issue you have here. On the one end, you have Ryoga's deck, which just sort of radically changes as he gets new boss monsters. And then on the other end, you have Kaito, whose deck is kind of always just the same thing. Get out Galaxy Eyes. And I feel like having these two extremes results in I just don't really care or remember anything about their decks. And yeah, that's kind of a bit of a problem now, is it? Feeling kind of fitting here in the middle is Jack Atlas and his Fiend themed deck. And you know what? I think they're pretty damn cool. Unlike Ryoga and Kaito's decks, where the theming is still very strong, I actually remember what a lot of his stuff does, and I think actually leads for him having a lot of really cool duels. On top of that, Red Dragon Archfiend just screams badass. And all the upgrades, whenever he gets an upgrade, it feels like a genuine event in the show and makes you just really fucking exciting to see what he's going to do next. Everything about this character is designed to exhume the concept of like being strong and powerful and egotistical. And I think his deck represents that perfectly. And I think sets the precedent for what's going to be great about the decks to come. You know what's better than just fiends? Rock and roll fiends. That's right. Up next is Roa. Why? Because this deck is such a perfect representation of this awesome, horrible, evil little shit that I just love. Like every time he summons something cool, he just puts in like all this energy, and the summoning animation is fucking badass. And it all just makes for just a really enjoyable, electrifying experience. The deck is a perfect symbol of just his like personality and everything he kind of does throughout the show. And I feel like this might be the deck that most fits a character in terms of just basic presentation. But I feel like he doesn't have enough duels, especially even with Yuga, to really get higher on the list. But being here, I think, is a really good showing of just how much effort was put into this guy. So like a lot of my ranking videos, number 2 and number 1 are kind of interchangeable. It sort of just depends on what kind of mood I'm in at the time. And right now, I feel like Revolver gets to be second because his deck combines two of the most ingenious themes possible for a rival: dragons and guns. That's right. Gun Dragons is so simple an idea, but so fucking perfect. I'm shocked it took them this long to get there, but it really gets the job done. These are two symbols, for better or for worse, of power in our society, and I think combining them here really just tells you everything you need to know about this character right off the bat. He's a powerful, aggressive, angry person, and he's got what it takes to get what he wants unless one guy stands in his way, and there's just something fucking badass about that. On top of that, something they do really well is every time he gets a new Link 4, it almost feels like an event. Rather, he shows off a Topologic or a Borreload or just any of his big name cards, you really feel like there's something big going on here. Like him getting to that next level of power is something that should either be feared or respected. And where you fall into that category is all just dependent on how you feel when you hear that awesome voice go Borreload something. So this might come as a shock to some because very rarely do I ever put DM stuff high up on my top 10 lists. And I've also said before, I don't really like Kaiba that much, but how can you not think his deck is just so fucking perfect as a rival deck? This is the one that all of them try to be like, and in a lot of ways I don't think any of them have really quite gotten there. And I think what makes Kaiba's deck just so fucking awesome is that it's such a perfect representation of just power and how the drive for it kind of like makes you kind of a wreck of a person. But it's just so cool. Everything he summons is powerful. Everything is iconic. Everything just exhumes that sense of like just insanity to it. Rather, it's like the big things like Blue Eyes or Obelisk, or even just like some of the simpler stuff that we forget was meta relevant at its time, like Vorse Raider or even Judge Man. Like, just everything Kaiba plays is cool. And what's important is that every time he goes up against Yugi and pushes out that next powerful card, you genuinely feel that Yugi has to try, that he has to think, that he has to come up with a way to deal with what Kaiba's put in front of him next, and he's better for it after the fact. And that is the point of a rival. That's why these characters are cool, because they make you want to be better. They make the protagonist sweat, And it's not because they're the big bad guy, just because they're really fucking good at Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think Kaiba still to this day exudes that feeling the best. But in the comment section below, give me your rankings for all the rival decks. I'm sure many people have many interesting takes and opinions in the comments below, but give me all that there. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next time to see what other crazy things the Yu-Gi-Oh! World throws at us.